All right, let's dive into this explainer and completely flip the script on how societies are actually built. We usually have this almost mathematical idea that a nation is just a government at the very top and then isolated individuals at the bottom. But the source material we're unpacking today reveals a fascinating, hidden architecture. It's an engine that really determines whether a civilization crumbles under pressure or whether it stands the test of time.
Now think about this historical paradox for a second, because this is going to be our guide to understanding true societal resilience. How on earth does a nation without a formal standing military fiercely repel an invading global superpower, but then, decades later, that exact same nation, now armed to the teeth with a massive modern army, folds almost immediately to a different invader? To solve that puzzle, we have to look way past the illusion of state power.
Section 1. The Illusion of Power. Debunking the state-centric myth.
Part 2. Intermediate groups, the core, the true vital organs of a nation. We always kind of assume that if we just fix the guy at the top of the pyramid, the whole system will magically fix itself. But history shows us that a supposedly perfect, modernized state can actually be completely hollow on the inside. The real muscle of a nation comes from what lies right there between the rulers and the citizens, what we call intermediate groups. We're talking about non-governmental collectives here. Think of teachers, trade guilds, scholars, transport workers, medical folks. Look at it this way. If the government vanished tomorrow, everyday life would generally just keep ticking along. But if these groups stop, imagine if every transport worker or farmer just halted for a month. Society would literally paralyze and starve. They are the actual vital organs of the nation.
And it's a lot like a starfish. Seriously, if you cut off a starfish's arm, it just regenerates. When massive, devastating forces like the Mongols swept through the Islamic world, they completely wiped out the political centers and the formal armies, but they couldn't destroy the society itself. Why? Because those resilient local communities, these intermediate groups, were decentralized and they were self-sustaining. So they regenerated, got organized, and eventually fought back, completely independently of any political head.
Section 3. The Modernization Trap. The Disaster of Muhammad Ali's State.
So, back to that crazy historical puzzle we started with. Let's look at a major stress test in Egypt. Back during the 1798 French invasion, the ruling military class basically packed up and fled. Poof, no state army. And yet, the French ran into this fierce, relentless grassroots resistance that lasted for years, from everyday scholars, local guilds, and regular people. They just wouldn't quit. Now compare that to the 1882 British invasion. By this time, Egypt has this massive, modernized state army. But it resulted in a swift collapse. The British literally walked right into a modernized Egypt and faced almost zero pushback from the general public. So, what on earth changed?
Well, the source material points out that in those intervening 80 years, the ruler, Muhammad Ali, built up this incredibly powerful state: factories, modern infrastructure, huge military, the works. But he did it by absolutely crushing those intermediate groups. He confiscated the independent community endowments that originally funded them. He set up a strict state monopoly over agriculture and industry, basically declaring himself the sole farmer and the sole merchant for the entire nation. And, to get his projects done, he enforced mass conscription and brutal forced labor. He essentially broke the human spirit just to build up state infrastructure.
As one historical observer perfectly nailed it at the time, you made a strong state, but weak humans. I mean, if you destroy human dignity, like having 30,000 people die digging a canal in forced labor just for a state project, you're creating a totally hollow society. Sure, you might have shiny new buildings and a massive army, but the actual human beings living inside that system have been completely stripped of their agency. They have zero will left to defend it. And when the pressure's on, a hollow society like that is going to collapse every single time.
Part 4. OCOV, the safety net, the historical mechanism of resilience.
Okay, so how did these intermediate groups actually stay independent back in the day? How did they fund themselves without just waiting around for government handouts? They used this brilliant mechanism called al-Khaf, which essentially means endowments. But we're not talking about a one-off charity here where you hand out some food and then the money's gone forever. No, al-Khaf were permanent, self-sustaining, profit-generating commercial investments. Think of a commercial farm, a bustling market, or real estate, where the profits are legally, permanently bound to fund extremely specific societal needs. It's how communities took care of themselves entirely independently without ever having to wait for the state to step in.
And the profound humanity, the incredible specificity of these historical endowments is just absolutely fascinating. People literally set up OCOF specifically to replace broken pots. Why? Because if a servant or a kid accidentally dropped a plate, they wouldn't get in trouble or be punished when they went home. They could just get a new one. There were OCOF entirely dedicated to funding veterinary care and food for stray cats and dogs. There was even a fully funded safe house for angry wives, literally just a place for them to go and cool off for a few days to prevent domestic issues from escalating. Others just bought free pencils and ink for students. They saw a gap in their society and boom, they built a self-sustaining economic engine to fix it.
Section 5. Modern Community Leadership, Grassroots Agency Today.
Now, this whole bottom-up engine of community projects, it is definitely not just some ancient history lesson. It's incredibly active right now. Just look at these modern examples. Global water charities aren't just handing out water. Their real societal impact is that they free up kids so they can actually play and go to school instead of spending their days hauling heavy buckets around. Over in India, the Barefoot College realized, hey, you don't need a 20-year engineering degree to solve local problems. They're literally teaching practical engineering skills to illiterate grandmothers. And those grandmothers are now successfully repairing solar panels for their entire villages. And then there's the incredible story of Tafana al-Ashraf.
In this Egyptian village called Tafahana el-Ashraf, a group of educated young people moved back home and made a choice. They decided they weren't going to sit around waiting for the government to fix their struggling infrastructure. Instead, they pooled their own local money into community agricultural businesses, and they used the profits, operating exactly like a modern awakaf, to build their own schools, their own train station, and eventually an entire university branch right there in their village. They completely transformed their society from the ground up. And because of these intermediate, grassroots efforts, the project was so unbelievably successful that the number of people who needed basic charity or zakat in that village dropped all the way to zero. Yes, zero. They eradicated local poverty entirely on their own.
Part 6. The Limit of the Possible. Start with yourself.
So this brings us to the ultimate takeaway from this explainer and how it really reframes the way we look at societal reform. The source material leaves us with this incredibly powerful thought. The limit of the possible is much higher than the combined efforts of all who are currently working. You know, we so often trick ourselves into apathy. We look up at these massive, towering, top-down political structures. We realize we can't change them overnight, and we just kind of throw our hands up and decide we can't do anything at all. We essentially use the impossibility of the macro to excuse our inaction in the micro.
But here's the reality. Your immediate sphere of influence is wide open, and it is waiting for you. You don't need state permission to teach someone how to read. You don't need some grand sweeping political shift to organize a local fund, go clean up your street, mentor a struggling student, or just work on improving your own skills so you can better serve your community. The space for these intermediate groups to step up and thrive is absolutely massive. So as we wrap up this explainer, I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Instead of sitting around waiting for a savior at the top of the pyramid or just despairing over all the things you absolutely cannot control, what hidden engine are you building in your community right now?